AITA for refusing to help my ex-fiancée after she humiliated me at our wedding. Ran off with my best friend, and then came back years later expecting me to fix the mess they made. 3 years after the worst day of my life, my ex-fiancée showed up outside my office, crying. The woman who had left me at the altar was standing there asking for help. What she wanted from me made absolutely no sense. But what shocked me even more was the reason she said she had no one else to turn to. But before we start today's story, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. My name is Daniel Carter, I'm 34 years old, and this happened last year. By the time Olivia showed up at my office, I hadn't seen her in over 3 years. The moment I recognized her through the glass entrance doors, I honestly thought I was imagining things. She looked completely different, not physically, just tired. The confident woman I once knew looked exhausted. She stood in the lobby clutching a small purse while repeatedly glancing toward the exit like she wasn't even sure she should be there. For a second, old memories hit me all at once. Then the anger returned. I walked back into my office and told the receptionist I wasn't interested in seeing her. 5 minutes later, my receptionist knocked on my door again. "Daniel, she's still here." I looked up from my computer. "So?" "She says she won't leave until she apologizes." I laughed. 3 years too late. "Tell her to go home." The receptionist nodded and left. 10 minutes later, I looked through the window again. Olivia was still sitting there. Part of me wanted to ignore her. Another part wanted answers I never got. Eventually, curiosity won. I walked into the lobby. The second she saw me, she stood up. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then she quietly said, "You look good." I almost smiled at how ridiculous that sounded. The last time we'd seen each other was on the day she publicly destroyed my life. "Why are you here, Olivia?" She lowered her eyes. I wanted to apologize. I folded my arms. "You drove across the city to apologize 3 years later?" She hesitated. "No." "Then what do you want?" The answer didn't come immediately. That was my first sign something was seriously wrong. Finally, she said, "I need help." And just like that, every bit of sympathy disappeared. Of course, she needed something. People don't usually return after 3 years because they suddenly develop a conscience. I looked toward the exit. "We're done here. Please, Daniel." "No, just give me 5 minutes." I should have walked away. Instead, I sat down across from her. 5 minutes. That's all I intended to give her. At the time, I had no idea that conversation would drag me back into a chapter of my life I thought was permanently closed. To understand why seeing Olivia again affected me so much, you need to understand what happened 3 years earlier. Back then, I believed my life was heading exactly where I wanted. I owned a small construction company. It wasn't huge, but it was successful enough that I could finally breathe financially. I was engaged to a woman I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. And my best friend Ryan Mitchell had been by my side for nearly 20 years. Ryan and I met when we were 12. We played sports together, went to school together. He was like a brother to me. When I got engaged to Olivia, asking Ryan to be my best man wasn't even a decision. It was automatic, at least that's what I thought. The wedding was scheduled for early June. Everything had been planned months in advance. The venue, the catering, the flowers, the photographer, every detail was ready. The morning of the wedding felt normal. I was nervous but excited. Family members were arriving. Friends were joking around. People kept telling me how lucky I was. For most of that morning, I believed them. Then, about 40 minutes before the ceremony, things started getting strange. One of Olivia's bridesmaids approached us. She looked worried. "Has anyone seen Olivia?" At first, nobody panicked. People assumed she was touching up her makeup or calming her nerves. But 10 minutes passed, then 20. Soon multiple people were searching the venue. Nobody could find her. I remember standing in a side room feeling confused more than worried. Then Ryan disappeared too. At the time, I barely noticed. Everyone was focused on finding Olivia. About 15 minutes later, Olivia's father received a text message. I'll never forget the expression on his face. The color drained from it instantly. "What is it?" someone asked. He didn't answer. He simply handed me his phone. The message was short, painfully short. "I'm sorry, I can't do this. Ryan and I are leaving together. Please don't contact us." For several seconds, I just stared at the screen. My brain refused to process what I was reading. Ryan and I are leaving together. The words didn't make sense. They felt impossible. Then reality hit me. The room suddenly felt smaller. People started whispering. Someone cursed. Someone else started crying. I honestly don't remember much after that. Only fragments. My mother holding my arm. Guests leaving. My father wanting to call Ryan's family. The overwhelming feeling of humiliation. Nearly 150 people had gathered to watch me get married. Instead, they watched me get abandoned. For weeks afterward, I barely left my house. The story spread quickly. Friends heard about it. Business contacts heard about it. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years somehow knew. Everywhere I went, I felt like people were looking at me differently. Not because they hated me, because they pitied me, and somehow that felt worse. A month later, I learned something that hurt even more. The relationship between Ryan and Olivia hadn't started recently. It had been going on for almost a year. Several mutual friends eventually admitted they suspected something. Nobody had proof, but looking back, the signs had been there. The private conversations, the strange excuses, the times they both happened to be unavailable. I felt like a fool. Not because they betrayed me, because I trusted them completely. The next year was rough. I threw myself into work because I didn't know what else to do. Some days I worked 12 hours, other days 16. Slowly my company grew. Then it grew again. Projects became bigger. Contracts became larger. Eventually the business expanded into neighboring cities. The more successful I became, the less I thought about Olivia and Ryan. At least that's what I told myself. The truth is, some betrayals never fully leave you. You simply learn how to carry them. Which brings us back to the day Olivia appeared in my office. She sat across from me quietly. For the first time in years, I looked directly into her eyes. What I saw surprised me. Not guilt, not shame. Fear. Real fear. And when she finally explained why she had come to see me, I realized this wasn't the apology visit I thought it was. It was something much bigger. Something that would force me to make a decision I never expected to face. Then Olivia took a deep breath and said 4 words that immediately changed everything. Ryan is in jail. And that was only the beginning. For a moment, I thought I had heard her wrong. Ryan is in jail? Olivia slowly nodded. I leaned back in my chair and stared at her. 3 years earlier, Ryan had walked out of my life without a single explanation. Since then, I hadn't spoken to him once. Not because I didn't have opportunities, because I didn't want them. As far as I was concerned, he no longer existed. What happened? I asked. Olivia looked down at her hands. It started about 2 years ago. She explained that after leaving town together, she and Ryan moved to another state and rented an apartment. At first, everything looked perfect. At least on social media. The smiling photos, the vacations, the captions about new beginnings. According to Olivia, most of it was fake. Ryan struggled to keep jobs. He borrowed money from people constantly. Whenever something went wrong, he blamed everyone except himself. Olivia admitted she ignored dozens of warning signs because she desperately wanted to believe she hadn't destroyed her entire life for the wrong person. I kept telling myself things would get better, she said. They didn't. Eventually, Ryan started a small business with 2 partners. The business failed less than a year later. Then one of the partners accused Ryan of moving company funds into his personal accounts. An investigation followed. The evidence was enough for criminal charges. Ryan accepted a plea agreement and ended up in prison. I listened without saying much. Part of me felt satisfied, not proud of it, just honest. After everything he'd done, hearing that life had finally caught up to him felt like justice. But Olivia wasn't finished. There's more. Of course there was. There always was. She took a deep breath. Our daughter is sick. The words immediately changed the atmosphere. I frowned. Daughter? Olivia nodded. Her name is Emma. She's 4. For a second, neither of us spoke. A child changed everything. Not because it erased what happened. Because children don't choose the mistakes their parents make. What kind of illness? I asked. It's a heart condition. She quickly pulled several papers from her purse. Medical reports, appointment summaries, doctor recommendations. Unlike some dramatic stories you hear online, she wasn't asking me to blindly believe her. She brought evidence. I looked through the documents for several minutes. I wasn't a doctor, but it was obvious the situation was serious. Emma needed a procedure. The doctors expected a positive outcome. But delaying treatment would increase the risks. I handed the papers back. What does any of this have to do with me? The answer came immediately. I can't afford it. There it was. The real reason she had come. Not an apology. Not closure. Money. I stood up. The conversation was over. Olivia looked panicked. Please sit down. No. Daniel, please. I shook my head. 3 years ago, she had walked away from me. Now she was asking me to solve problems created by decisions she willingly made. I felt anger rising in my chest again. Why would you think I'd help you? Tears filled her eyes. Because I don't know what else to do. That's not my responsibility. I know. For a second, her answer caught me off guard. There was no arguing, no blaming, no excuses, just acceptance. I know it's not your responsibility, she said quietly, but I'm asking anyway. I looked away. Because the truth was, she wasn't asking for herself. She was asking for her daughter. And that made saying no much harder than I expected. Eventually, I walked her to the lobby. Before leaving, she handed me a business card. The card belonged to Emma's cardiologist. If you think I'm lying, call them. Then she left. I watched her walk out of the building and disappear into the parking lot. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus. Every time I tried working, I kept thinking about that little girl. Not Olivia, not Ryan. Emma, a child I had never met. A child who had nothing to do with the choices her parents made. That night I told my fiancée, Sophie, everything. Unlike me, Sophie had never met Olivia. She only knew the story. When I finished explaining the situation, she sat quietly for a few moments. Then she asked a question I wasn't prepared for. If Emma were a stranger's child, what would you do? I looked at her, she continued. If none of the history existed, would you want to help? The question stayed with me, because the answer was obvious. Yes, I probably would. The next morning, I called the hospital. Not because I had decided to help, because I wanted the truth. After several conversations and a lot of verification, I learned that Olivia had been honest. Emma existed. The diagnosis was real. The procedure was real. Nothing about the situation was fabricated. That should have made my decision easier. Instead, it made it harder. For nearly 2 weeks, I went back and forth. Some friends told me to stay away. Others told me helping a child wasn't the same thing as helping Olivia. Both arguments made sense. Finally, Sophie sat me down one evening. You keep treating this like there are only 2 options. What do you mean? You think helping Emma means forgiving Olivia. I frowned. And? They aren't the same thing. The more I thought about it, the more I realized she was right. Eventually, I contacted an attorney. Then I contacted the hospital. A few days later, I called Olivia. When she answered, she sounded terrified. Daniel, I'm willing to help. For a second, she started crying. Then I stopped her. But listen carefully. She immediately went quiet. I am not giving money to you. Okay. I am not giving money to Ryan. Okay. The funds will go directly to the hospital through a legal arrangement. Every dollar will be documented. Okay. I could hear the relief in her voice. For the first time since she'd entered my office, she sounded hopeful. The paperwork took several weeks. After everything was finalized, Emma's procedure was scheduled. I didn't attend. I didn't meet Olivia. I simply waited for updates. The surgery lasted several hours. Late that evening, my phone rang. It was Olivia. I almost didn't answer. When I did, she was crying again, but this time they were happy tears. It worked. I closed my eyes. For the first time in months, I felt some of the tension leave my body. Emma was going to be okay. A few months later, something happened that I never expected. I received a handwritten letter in the mail. It was from Olivia. Inside was a simple apology. Not excuses, not explanations, not requests. An apology. She accepted responsibility for everything. Leaving me, lying to me, humiliating me, breaking my trust. At the very end, she wrote one sentence that stayed with me. You deserved better than the way I treated you. I read that sentence 3 times. Not because it fixed anything. Because it was the first time she had ever fully acknowledged the damage she caused. A year has passed since then. I haven't seen Olivia again. I don't know if I ever will. Ryan is still serving his sentence. Emma is healthy and doing well according to the last update I received. And as for me, a few months ago I married Sophie. The wedding was small, simple, peaceful. Exactly what I wanted. No drama, no secrets, no doubts, just honesty. Looking back, people sometimes ask if I was wrong for refusing to immediately rescue my ex-fiancée after everything she did. Honestly, I don't think so. Actions have consequences. Trust matters. And nobody is entitled to a second chance. But I also learned something important. Helping an innocent person doesn't mean excusing the people who hurt you. You can have boundaries and still have compassion. You can remember the past without letting it control your future. And sometimes the strongest form of healing isn't revenge. It's proving that someone else's betrayal didn't change the kind of person you choose to be. What would you have done if you were in my position? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories filled with drama, suspense, and shocking twists, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload.